They thought intimidating a widow would be easy. They thought no one would care. They thought wrong. Because what they didn't know was that a Navy SEAL and his combat-trained German Shepherd were watching. And some lines should never be crossed. Before we begin, tell us where you are watching from. And if you want to support the channel, please subscribe and hit the like button on this video. The Pacific Northwest in late October wore its melancholy like a second skin. Anchor Bay, Oregon, stretched along a rugged stretch of coastline where gray ocean met gray sky in a seamless horizon. The boundary between them visible only when waves crashed white against black rocks. Population 3,200 on a good day, less when the fishing was poor and the young ones fled to cities that promised more than salt air and fading dreams. The town clung to a crescent bay protected by cliff walls on either side. A single main road snaking in from the highway 45 miles east through dense forest that seemed to swallow the outside world completely. The wind that afternoon carried the smell of brine and dying kelp, cutting through worn jackets and finding gaps in weathered buildings that lined Main Street. Most storefronts bore signs from decades past, their paint faded but stubbornly legible. A few had gone dark entirely, windows covered with plywood announcing bankruptcy or simply abandonment. This was a town that had seen better days and knew it. The man driving the dusty black Ford F-150 through that gray afternoon seemed carved from the same unyielding material as the cliffs themselves. Ethan Cole was 34 years old, though his eyes carried the weight of more years than that. 6 feet 2 inches of controlled power. 205 pounds, distributed with the efficiency of someone who understood his body as a weapon and a tool. His posture, even seated behind the wheel, maintained the ramrod discipline of 12 years as a Navy SEAL, a period of his life that had ended 6 months ago, in a discharge that was technically voluntary but felt like exile. The scar along his left jawline caught the gray light filtering through the windshield, a pale line that ran from just below his ear to the corner of his mouth. Syria had given him that, along with nightmares that still jerked him awake at 0300, heart-hammering, reaching for weapons that were no longer within reach. He'd come to Anchor Bay because it was remote, because no one knew him here, because the rental listing for the cabin had promised isolation and the kind of silence that might let a man forget. In the passenger seat, the German Shepherd, named Maverick, sat with the perfect stillness of a trained operator. 95 pounds of muscle, intelligence, and loyalty that transcended the bond between man and animal into something closer to brotherhood. 5 years old, 3 combat tours, more missions than Ethan cared to count. The dog's ears swiveled constantly, processing sounds Ethan's merely human senses couldn't detect. Maverick wasn't a pet. He was a partner, a weapon, a living extension of Ethan's will that required no words to understand intent. They moved through the world with an economy of motion that marked them both as different, as other. Civilians didn't recognize it consciously, but something in their hindbrains registered the controlled danger, the watchful eyes that cataloged exits and threats and tactical advantages even in mundane situations. The truck rolled down Main Street at exactly 25 miles per hour. Ethan's gaze tracking left and right with the systematic pattern of someone clearing sectors. Harbor Page's bookshop and cafe occupied a corner building with large windows facing both the street and the waterfront boardwalk beyond. A hand-painted sign swung gently in the wind. 2 elderly men sat outside Keller's Hardware, 3 doors down, coffee cups steaming. A woman pushed a stroller past the post office, hunched against the wind. Normal. Quiet. Exactly what he'd been looking for. The cabin sat 3 miles north of town, accessed by a rutted gravel road that climbed the southern cliff face in a series of switchbacks before terminating at a clearing where forest met sky. The structure itself was small, functional, unremarkable. Single story, 2 bedrooms, a main room combining kitchen and living space, walls of weathered cedar that had gone silver with age. But it had what Ethan needed: isolation. Clear sight lines in 3 directions. A single approach road that would give warning of any visitors. and silence broken only by wind, waves, and the occasional cry of gulls. He unloaded his gear with the methodical precision of long habit. Duffel bags containing clothes and personal items went into the main bedroom. A locked hard case containing his service weapons, properly registered and legally owned, but kept secure out of instinct, went into the closet. Another case held Maverick's equipment: tactical vest, leads, first aid supplies designed for canine use. Everything had its place. Order was control, and control was survival. Maverick explored the perimeter immediately. Upon release, nose to ground, body language readable to Ethan like text on a page. The dog moved in expanding circles around the cabin, marking territory, cataloging scents, processing information about every animal and human that had passed through in recent days. After 10 minutes, he returned and sat before Ethan with a soft huff. All clear. Secure. That night, Ethan sat on the cabin's small porch, a bottle of beer growing warm in his hand. Watching fog roll in from the ocean like a living thing. It moved up the cliff face in tendrils, swallowing the town below until only scattered lights remained visible, faint and isolated. Maverick lay beside him, head on paws. But even in rest, the dog remained alert. This was what peace was supposed to feel like. Distance, quiet, the absence of threat. So why did it feel so much like waiting? The following morning arrived, wrapped in that same gray fog. Visibility reduced to perhaps 30 yards. Ethan ran 5 miles along the cliff road, Maverick matching his pace effortlessly, both of them moving through the white void like ghosts. His breath misted before him, legs burning pleasantly with exertion that was routine, necessary, the maintenance of a body that had been honed into an instrument of violence and needed to remain sharp even without purpose. They entered town just after 0800, the world slowly emerging from fog as sunlight began its losing battle against Pacific cloud cover. Main Street showed signs of life now. Trucks parked at angles before the diner, lights on in the post office and hardware store, and outside Harbor Pages, an elderly woman unlocking the front door, a small corgi dancing excited circles around her feet. Ethan had learned long ago to trust his instincts. Those subconscious calculations the brain made faster than conscious thought could follow. And right now, those instincts were telling him something was wrong. It started with Maverick. The German shepherd had been trotting beside him with the relaxed gait of a morning walk. But as they approached Harbor Pages, the dog's entire body language shifted. Ears snapped forward, muscles tensed beneath the dark fur. His pace slowed to a stalk, head lowering slightly. Eyes fixed on the bookshop entrance with an intensity that made Ethan's hand instinctively move toward his hip, where a sidearm would have rested on deployment. The woman at the door was in her late 60s, perhaps 5'4", with gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore a cardigan over a floral dress, practical shoes, reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. The corgi at her feet was older too, his red and white coat graying around the muzzle. Movements stiff with arthritis, but spirit still bright. She turned as she heard their approach, and Ethan saw her face clearly for the first time. Asian features, kind eyes that crinkled at the corners, but also something else. A tightness around her mouth. A way of holding herself that spoke of someone carrying weight they shouldn't have to bear. "Good morning," she said, voice steady but quiet. "You're new in town." It wasn't a question. In a place this small, strangers were noticed immediately. "Just arrived yesterday," Ethan replied, keeping his distance, giving her space. "Renting the Hendricks cabin up on the cliff." "Ah." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "That's been empty since June. I'm Margaret Chen. Most people call me Maggie. I run this place." She gestured to the bookshop behind her. "Ethan Cole." The corgi had waddled over to investigate, tail wagging. And Ethan expected Maverick to maintain his usual professional disinterest in other animals. Instead, something remarkable happened. The German shepherd lowered his head, touching his nose gently to the smaller dogs in a gesture that was almost protective. Then Maverick moved closer to Maggie, not threatening, but positioning himself between her and the street. Body language screaming guardian. Maggie noticed. Her hand dropped to Maverick's head. Fingers scratching behind his ears with the automatic motion of someone who understood dogs. What's his name? Maverick. Military. Ethan's eyes sharpened slightly. Most civilians didn't make that connection immediately. We both were. She nodded, understanding passing between them that required no elaboration. This is Rusty. He was my husband's dog. David passed 18 months ago. The grief in her voice was old but permanent. The kind that didn't fade so much as become part of the landscape of a person's soul. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. She straightened, squaring her shoulders in a way that reminded Ethan of soldiers preparing for patrol. Would you like coffee? I just put on a fresh pot. He should have said no. Should have maintained the distance he'd come here to establish. But Maverick was still pressed against her leg. And the Dom's instincts had kept Ethan alive through 3 tours in places where a second's inattention meant death in the dirt. Coffee sounds good. The interior of Farber Pages was exactly what a bookshop should be, floor to ceiling. Or to ceiling shelves crammed with volumes old and new, the smell of paper and binding glue and coffee mixing into something warm and inviting. A half-dozen small tables occupied the front section near windows overlooking the waterfront. An old cash register sat on a wooden counter that had probably been there since the building was constructed sometime in the previous century. Maggie moved behind the counter with practiced efficiency, pouring 2 cups from a carafe. Cream or sugar? Black. A man after David's heart. She slid the cup across to him. He always said anything added to coffee was a waste of good beans. Ethan took the cup, noting the slight tremor in her hands she tried to hide. You okay, Mrs. Chen? Maggie, please. She smiled again, that same fragile expression. And I'm fine. Just tired. Haven't been sleeping well lately. Before he could respond, Maverick's head snapped toward the window. His body went rigid. A low growl building in his chest that Ethan felt more than heard. Not the warning growl for wildlife or other dogs. This was the sound the dog made when identifying human threats. Ethan turned smoothly, hands setting down the coffee cup, body positioning between Maggie and whatever had triggered his partner. A black Cadillac Escalade had pulled up outside, windows tinted dark enough to be illegal in most states. 3 men emerged. The first was maybe 6'1", 220, moving with the confident swagger of someone who'd learned violence but not discipline. Ex-military. Ethan's brain cataloged automatically, but the wrong kind of discharge. The other 2 were younger, muscles built in gyms rather than through functional work, the kind of hired muscle that looked impressive until they faced someone who actually knew what they were doing. They entered the shop, and the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. The lead man's eyes swept the interior, dismissing Ethan with barely a glance before locking onto Maggie. Mrs. Chen, we need to talk. Maggie's hand tightened on the edge of the counter. I told Mr. Harlow's lawyers everything I have to say. I'm not selling. See, that's the problem. The man moved closer, invading her space deliberately. Mr. Harlow's been very patient, very generous with his offers, but patience runs out. The property isn't for sale at any price. This was my husband's dream. I won't. Your husband's dead. The words were delivered with casual cruelty. And you're what, 60-something? Living alone? Running a failing business? He leaned against the counter, false friendliness dripping like poison. Things happen to old ladies living alone. Accidents, falls, fires. Ethan felt something cold settle in his chest, the combat clarity that came before action. She said no. All 3 men turned to look at him properly now, reassessing. The leader's eyes narrowed. This doesn't concern you, friend. Not your friend. Ethan's voice stayed level, quiet. The kind of calm that people with real experience recognized as dangerous. And you're done here. The man straightened, hand moving toward his waistband, in a gesture meant to suggest a weapon. You really want to do this? Maverick rose to all 4s, head low, teeth visible. A sound coming from him that was pure predator. All 3 men took an involuntary step backward. The leader forced a laugh. We're leaving. But Mrs. Chen? He locked eyes with Maggie. Mr. Harlow expects an answer by Monday. Make the right choice. His gaze dropped to Rusty, who'd been cowering behind Maggie's legs. Would be a shame if something happened to your little dog. Real shame. They left, the Escalade pulling away with theatrical tire squeal. Silence filled the shop like floodwater. Maggie's hands were shaking openly now. She sank onto a stool behind the counter, face pale. "I'm sorry you had to see that. How long has this been going on?" 18 months. Since David died. Her voice cracked slightly. "A developer named Vincent Harlow wants to build a resort. Luxury condos, marina, the whole thing. He's been buying up properties all along this stretch of coast. I'm the last holdout. This building sits on the key parcel he needs. And the police?" Her laugh was bitter. "Chief Crenshaw and Harlow play golf together. Every complaint I filed has gone nowhere." Ethan felt Maverick press against his leg, the dog's attention still fixed on the street where the Escalade had disappeared. Not his fight, not his town. He'd come here for isolation, for peace, to forget the weight of being responsible for lives other than his own. But that threat against the dog, against a woman who'd already lost everything that mattered. Some things a man couldn't ignore. "I should go," he said finally. "Thank you for the coffee." Maggie nodded, trying to compose herself. "Thank you for being here." Ethan and Maverick left, walking back toward where he'd parked the truck. But his mind was already working, processing, cataloging details the way he'd been trained to do. The leader's body language suggested army, probably infantry. The Escalade's license plate was local. 3 men meant more available. The threat was credible and escalating, not his fight. That night, back at the cabin, Ethan tried to settle into routine. Cleaned his weapons, made dinner, sat on the porch watching fog reclaim the world. But Maverick wouldn't settle. The dog paced, whining softly, moving between Ethan and the door. Around midnight, he planted himself directly in front of Ethan and barked once, sharp and demanding. Ethan looked into those intelligent brown eyes and saw the same thing he'd seen outside the bookshop. Purpose, mission, the recognition of someone who needed protecting. Far below, barely audible through the wind, came the sound of breaking glass. Ethan was moving before conscious thought caught up, grabbing his jacket, checking his sidearm. "Gear up," he told Maverick, the old command that meant tactical vest, mission ready. Because maybe it wasn't his fight, but leaving people to face evil alone wasn't something he knew how to do anymore. They descended into the fog-wrapped darkness, heading toward town and whatever came next. The fog transformed Anko Bay into something from a nightmare. Streetlights creating halos of sickly yellow that revealed nothing beyond their immediate circles. Ethan drove without headlights, navigating by memory and the faint glow of the town below. Every sense heightened to combat sharpness. Beside him, Maverick sat rigid in his tactical vest, nose working the air coming through the cracked window, processing information Ethan couldn't access. They were 2 blocks from Harbor Pages when Maverick's growl escalated to a bark. Ethan killed the engine, stepping out into cold that bit through his jacket. The street was empty, silent except for wind and the distant crash of waves. But something was wrong. The wrongness hung in the air like cordite. He moved through shadows with Maverick at his heel, both of them ghosts in the fog. Training took over, urban combat patterns ingrained through thousands of repetitions. Check corners, use available cover, minimize profile. The bookshop appeared gradually through the mist, and Ethan's jaw tightened. The front window was shattered, glass glittering on the sidewalk like scattered diamonds. The door hung open, swinging slightly in the wind. No lights inside, no movement visible. Ethan drew his Sig Sauer P226, the weight familiar and cold in his hand. Maverick, seek. The dog moved forward in a low crouch, disappearing into the darkened shop. Ethan followed, weapon up, scanning sectors the way he'd done in Fallujah, in Kandahar, in a dozen other places where doorways meant potential death. His breathing stayed controlled, heart rate steady, despite the adrenaline singing through his veins. The interior was chaos. Bookshelves toppled, volumes scattered like broken birds, tables overturned, the cash register smashed open, though Ethan doubted money had been the objective. This was a message written in destruction. This was terror tactics. Maverick barked from the back room, the sharp, urgent sound that meant contact. Ethan moved fast, rounding the counter, weapon tracking. The back room was living quarters, a small apartment where Nagy had presumably retreated when maintaining the house she'd shared with her husband became too much. More destruction here. Furniture overturned, photographs torn from walls. And in the corner, partially hidden behind an upended couch, Maggie Chen lay motionless. Ethan was beside her in 2 strides, fingers finding the pulse point on her neck. Present, strong. Relief flooded through him as her eyes fluttered open, confused and frightened. "Don't move," he said quietly. "Where are you hurt?" She blinked, trying to focus. "My head. They pushed me. I fell." Her hand moved shakily to touch her temple, coming away with blood. "Rusty, where's Rusty?" As if in answer, a faint whimpering came from the bathroom. Maverick was already there, nosing the door open. The corgi cowered in the corner behind the toilet, trembling but alive. The relief on Maggie's face was worth more than all the medals Ethan had earned and never worn. "They said this was my last warning." Her voice shook. "That next time they'd burn it all, with Rusty inside. They made me choose, sign the papers or they'd hurt him, kill him." Tears tracked through the dust on her face. "I told them no, I couldn't. This place is all I have left of David." Ethan felt something shift inside him. Some final barrier between observer and participant crumbling to dust. This wasn't intimidation anymore. This was attempted murder. These men had crossed every line that mattered. "Can you stand?" She nodded, letting him help her up. She moved carefully, testing limbs, wincing but functional. The head wound looked worse than it was. Scalp bleeding freely, but not deep. Ethan had seen enough combat injuries to know the difference between serious and survivable. "You're coming with me," he said. "Not a question, not negotiable. Pack what you need for a few days. Medicine, clothes, whatever documents you have about the property and these threats." "I can't just leave, Mrs. Chen." It met her eyes directly. "Maggie, you stay here, you die. They're not making threats anymore. They're following through. So you have 2 choices. Come with me and let me help, or wait here for them to finish the job." She stared at him for a long moment, seeing something in his face that made her straighten despite the pain. "Who are you really?" "Someone who's tired of watching bullies win." 20 minutes later, they were climbing the switchback road to his cabin. Maggie in the passenger seat with Rusty on her lap, Maverick in the extended cab behind them, alert and watchful. She'd packed 1 small suitcase, grabbed a metal lockbox from under her bed, and taken a framed photograph of a smiling Asian man with kind eyes. Her husband. Her anchor to everything she was fighting to preserve. The cabin was cold but secure. Ethan settled her on the couch, brought first aid supplies, cleaned and dressed her head wound with the efficiency of someone who'd performed field medicine under fire. She sat quietly, letting him work. Rusty pressed against her leg. "Tell me everything," Ethan said when he finished. "From the beginning." So she did. Vincent Harlow had appeared in Anchor Bay 2 years ago. Charm and money opening doors. He'd started buying properties through shell companies, LLCs with names like Pacific Coast Development and Northwest Holdings. Most owners sold willingly, attracted by offers well above market value. Those who resisted found themselves facing code violations, tax audits, sudden problems with permits and licenses. David Chen had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer 3 years ago. He'd fought for 18 months, and Maggie had been so focused on his care that she barely noticed the changes in town. By the time he died, Harlow owned everything around her building. The first offer came 1 week after the funeral. She'd refused. The offers had escalated in price and pressure. There were others who said no, Maggie said quietly. Frank Morrison owned the cannery building. He refused to sell. His place burned down 6 months ago. Fire marshal called it electrical, but Frank swore he'd just had the wiring inspected. He took the insurance money and left town. Anyone else? Betty Wu ran the Chinese restaurant. She wouldn't sell. Someone broke in, destroyed everything, left threats. She's 68 years old. She sold for half what Harlow initially offered and moved to Portland to live with her daughter. Maggie's hands clenched. And Tom Brightwater. He was Silet's tribal elder, owned fishing rights to the river. He stood in the way of marina development. They found him at the base of the cliff last November. Everyone said he fell drunk. But Tom hadn't touched alcohol in 30 years. 3 incidents. 3 resistors. Fire, threats, death. A pattern that would be invisible to local police who didn't want to see it, but screamed criminal conspiracy to anyone with investigative training. You have proof of any of this? David kept records. He was always organized, detail-oriented. When things started getting strange, he documented everything. Times, dates, conversations. It's all in here. She touched the lockbox. But it doesn't matter. Chief Crenshaw won't look at it. The county sheriff says it's municipal jurisdiction. I tried contacting the FBI field office in Portland, but I'm just an old woman with paranoid conspiracy theories about a respected businessman. Ethan stood, moving to the window, looking out at darkness and fog. Maverick joined him, the dog's reflection in the glass, showing ears forward, alert. Mr. Harlow made a mistake, Ethan said quietly. What mistake? He turned to face her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. This wasn't the quiet man who drunk coffee in her shop. This was someone else entirely. Someone dangerous. He threatened you in front of me. He threatened your dog. And he assumed I'd be smart enough to walk away. His voice stayed level, calm, but underlaid with iron. I'd spent 12 years of my life going to places most people can't find on a map, hunting men who thought they were untouchable. I'm very good at it. And I'm tired of evil winning because good people are afraid to fight back. What are you saying? I'm saying you're not alone anymore. I'm saying they picked the wrong person to terrorize. And I'm saying that by Monday, when Harlow expects his answer, he's going to get one. Just not the one he wants. Maggie's eyes filled with tears, but her voice stayed steady. Why would you do this? You don't even know me. Ethan was quiet for a moment, old ghosts moving behind his eyes. Because I've stood by and watched people die when I had the training and ability to prevent it. Because I came here trying to find peace by running away from who I am. And because some things are worth fighting for, even if they're not yours. He crossed to her, dropping to one knee so their eyes were level. But I need you to understand something. Once this starts, it gets ugly. These men will fight back. There will be violence. And I can't guarantee everyone walks away clean. She reached out, her small hand covering his scarred one. My husband was the gentlest man I ever knew. But he was also Taiwanese. His parents fled during the White Terror when speaking against power meant disappearing in the night. He taught me that sometimes the only thing evil respects is strength. That there's a difference between peace and submission. She squeezed his hand. So yes, fight back. Make them understand that I'm not alone, that this matters. Maverick approached then, pushing his head under Maggie's other hand. Rusty, emboldened by the larger dog's presence, struggled to his feet and settled across both their laps, a small red bridge between warrior and widow. Outside, the fog pressed against the windows like something alive and patient. Somewhere in that darkness, men who thought themselves powerful and untouchable were sleeping soundly, confident in their control. They wouldn't sleep soundly much longer. Ethan stood, moving to his gear, beginning the familiar ritual of preparation. Get some rest. Tomorrow, we start pushing back. Morning arrived, gray and cold, the kind of dawn that felt less like beginning and more like continuation of night in different lighting. Ethan had been awake since 0400, old habits refusing to die even in civilian life. He'd spent the hours before sunrise transforming the cabin from refuge into defensive position. The windows now had clear sightlines, furniture repositioned to provide cover without blocking movement. His tactical gear was staged in the bedroom, weapons cleaned and loaded, spare magazines arranged for quick access. He'd walked the perimeter in darkness with Maverick, identifying approach routes, choke points, places where the forest pressed close enough to provide concealment for attackers. Maggie emerged from the guest room at 0630, moving stiffly. The bruise on her temple now fully bloomed into purple and yellow. Rusty tatted beside her, the little corgi's presence seeming to give her strength. Coffee's ready, Ethan said, pouring her a cup. How's the head? I've had worse. She accepted the mug, wrapping both hands around it for warmth. What happens now? Now we gather intelligence, understand what we're facing. He set David Chen's lockbox on the table between them. Show me everything. For the next 2 hours, they went through documents with the methodical precision of building a case. David had indeed been thorough. Spreadsheets tracking property purchases with dates and shell company names. Photographs of the same men appearing at multiple properties before owners sold. Copies of permits mysteriously denied, then approved immediately after sales went through. Notes on conversations, threats made, pressure applied. One name appeared repeatedly, Vincent Harlow. But the documentation revealed layers beneath. Harlow Coastal Development LLC was itself owned by a holding company registered in Delaware. Financial records David had somehow obtained showed money flowing from offshore accounts. This wasn't just a local real estate play. This was organized, systematic, and almost certainly illegal on multiple levels. Your husband was building a RICO case, Ethan said quietly, recognizing the pattern. Racketeer-influenced and corrupt organizations. Federal jurisdiction. Did he contact anyone outside Anchor Bay? He was going to. He had an appointment with someone in the Portland FBI office. 3 days before the appointment, he had a stroke. Her voice caught. The cancer had spread to his brain by then. He never recovered enough to tell me who he'd contacted or what evidence he'd planned to share. Ethan's jaw tightened. Convenient timing. Too convenient. The medical records. Who was his doctor? Dr. Harrison. He's been the town physician for 20 years. And the hospital? Bay Regional, 40 miles south, but the ambulance took him there. I didn't choose it. Another thread to pull. But not yet. First, they needed to understand the current threat landscape. A knock at the door brought both Ethan and Maverick to instant alertness. The dog moved to guard position, body language shifting to threat assessment. Ethan's hand moved to the concealed holster at his hip. "Stay here," he told Maggie, moving to the window beside the door. A woman stood on the porch, late 20s, athletic build, red hair pulled back in a ponytail. She held no visible weapons, but that meant nothing. She knocked again, then called out, "Mr. Cole, my name is Sarah Winters. I'm a journalist. I need to talk to you about Maggie Chen." Ethan opened the door 6 inches, body blocking entry. Weapon within reach, but not drawn. "How did you find this address?" She met his eyes directly, unflinching. "Small town. Your truck has Montana plates and you're renting the only available cabin. Not exactly deep cover." Her gaze shifted past him, spotting Maggie. "Mrs. Chen, thank God you're okay. I heard about the break-in." "You know her?" Ethan asked Maggie without turning. "Sarah grew up here. She's Bill Winters' daughter. She's been asking questions about Harlow." That decided it. Ethan opened the door wider. "Come in. Fast." Sarah entered, immediately registering the tactical arrangement of the cabin. The staging of equipment, Maverick's alert posture. Her eyes came back to Ethan with new understanding. "You're military." Was. "What do you want?" She pulled a tablet from her messenger bag, pulling up files. "I've been investigating Vincent Harlow for 8 months. He's done this before. 4 other coastal towns in Oregon and Northern California. Same pattern. Shell companies, property acquisition, pressure tactics. Mysterious accidents for anyone who resists. And he always gets away with it because local law enforcement is either bought or intimidated." She swiped through photographs. Different towns, different victims, same story. Buildings burned, people injured. A man in Brookings who'd fallen from scaffolding. A woman in Bandon whose car had gone off a cliff. Deaths ruled accidental. Resistance crushed. Fortunes made. Why hasn't anyone stopped him? Because he's careful, uses intermediaries, keeps his hands clean, and he has connections that go high. State senators, federal judges, people who make investigations disappear. She looked at Maggie. "You're the first person who's held out this long, and the only one who had someone documenting evidence." Ethan leaned back, processing. This wasn't just local corruption. This was organized crime with political protection, the kind of target that required federal resources and ironclad evidence. "What's your angle?" he asked Sarah. "My angle is that I lost my job at the Portland Tribune because I wouldn't drop this story. My editor killed it, said we'd be sued into oblivion. But I know what I saw. Pattern of corruption and violence stretching 5 years. At least 12 people dead or driven out. Hundreds of millions in profits." Her voice hardened. "And no one gives a damn because they're small-town people who don't matter to anyone." "They matter," Ethan said quietly. Sarah studied him for a long moment. "You're planning something." "I'm planning to make sure Mrs. Chen doesn't end up another accident statistic." "How?" "You're one man. Harlow has money, muscle, and legal protection." "I faced worse odds." Before Sarah could respond, Maverick's head snapped toward the window, ears forward, a low growl building. Ethan moved instantly, killing the lights, pulling Maggie away from sightlines. "Someone's coming," he said. "Sarah, can they connect you to this cabin?" "No, I parked in town and hiked up." "Good, stay away from windows." The sound of engines reached them now, multiple vehicles climbing the access road. Ethan moved to a window with a tactical view, staying in shadow. 2 vehicles, the black Escalade from yesterday and a gray pickup truck. 5 men total. The lead enforcer, Kurt Brennan, based on Sarah's files, plus 4 others. They parked blocking the driveway, spreading out in a loose formation that suggested some tactical training, but not enough discipline. Brennan approached the door alone, leaving the others as backup. Confident, arrogant, stupid. "Cole," Brennan's voice carried through the door. "We need to talk about your house guest." Ethan caught Maggie's eye, saw the fear there, but also trust. She was putting her life in his hands. He wouldn't fail her the way he'd failed his team in Syria. He opened the door, stepping out onto the porch, closing it behind him. Maverick remained inside, on guard. This conversation would be handled with words first. Violence was always an option, but it was cleaner when the enemy threw the first punch. "You're trespassing," Ethan said calmly. Brennan smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. "Friendly visit. Heard you had some property that doesn't belong to you." "Mrs. Chen is here voluntarily." "Is she?" "Because her shop got broken into last night. Police would really like to talk to her. Make sure she's okay." The threat was clear. "Come back to town, face whatever we have planned, or we'll come get you." "She'll talk to police when she's ready. Right now she's recovering from injuries sustained during that break-in." "Injuries?" Brennan's smile widened. "Must have been a nasty fall. Old people, they're so fragile." "You really should encourage her to accept Mr. Harlow's very generous offer, before something worse happens." Ethan felt the familiar cold settle over him. Combat calm, the place where fear didn't exist, and decisions became simple mathematics. "Here's what's going to happen. You and your friends are going to leave. Mrs. Chen is staying here under my protection. And if any of you come back, you won't leave on your feet." Brennan laughed. "Tough guy. You know who you're dealing with?" "I know exactly who I'm dealing with. Ex-Army, probably infantry, dishonorable discharge for conduct issues. Working private security because no legitimate outfit would hire you. You're used to intimidating civilians who can't fight back." Ethan's voice never rose above conversational. "I'm not a civilian." The smile faded from Brennan's face. "You really want to do this?" "No, I want you to leave and never come back. But if you insist on escalation, I've spent 12 years becoming very good at controlled violence. Your choice." For a moment, tension stretched tight as piano wire. Brennan's hand twitched toward his waistband. Behind him, the other 4 men shifted, reading their leader's body language, preparing for the signal. Then Maverick appeared in the window, teeth bared, and the sound that came from him was pure predator. Brennan stepped back. "This isn't over." "It is for today." They left. Vehicles kicking up gravel, but Ethan knew it was temporary. He just painted a target on himself, made himself the obstacle that needed removing. Inside, Sarah stood by the window, tablet forgotten in her hands, face pale. "You just threatened Vincent Harlow's head enforcer. You understand what that means? It means we accelerated the timeline." Ethan moved to his gear, pulling out a tactical vest, checking magazine loads with practiced efficiency. They were going to escalate anyway. Now they'll come hard and fast, which means they'll make mistakes. Maggie sat on the couch, Rusty pressed against her side. "Maybe I should just sign, give them what they want. This isn't worth people dying over. It's not about the property anymore." Ethan's voice was gentle but firm. "Sarah, show her the pattern." Sarah pulled up files on her tablet, sitting beside Maggie. Every person who gave in to Harlow's pressure signed non-disclosure agreements as part of the sale. They're legally forbidden from talking about the intimidation tactics. And Harlow still owns everything. The businesses close, the buildings get demolished, communities die. He's not developing these properties. He's land banking, holding them until values skyrocket, then flipping to Chinese investment firms for 3 times what he paid. She swiped to financial documents. "I traced it through 6 shell companies. He's laundering money from overseas, using these small towns as real estate fronts. That's why he has political protection. He's not just a developer. He's part of an international financial crime network. Maggie's face hardened as she absorbed the information. David was right. He said it wasn't about business. It was about control. Your husband was building a case that could bring down more than just Harlow, Sarah said. If this reaches the right people at the FBI, it could expose corruption across 3 states. If it reaches the right people, Ethan emphasized. Right now, we're isolated, outnumbered, and facing an enemy with resources and local law enforcement in their pocket. He turned to Sarah. You said you have contacts at the Portland FBI office? I do. Special Agent Marcus Webb. He's in the Financial Crimes Division. I've been feeding him information, but he says without hard evidence and a credible witness willing to testify, he can't move. Harlow's lawyers would bury any investigation. David's documents aren't enough? They're circumstantial, and they're from a dead man. Any prosecutor would say they could be fabricated. We need more. Live witnesses, financial records, something that ties Harlow directly to criminal activity that can't be explained away. Ethan's mind worked through tactical problems like solving equations. They needed evidence, protection, and time, and they had none of those in abundance. When do they come back? Tonight, Sarah said with certainty. Harlow operates on intimidation and momentum. You challenged his authority. He'll respond fast to re-establish control. Good, let them come. Ethan pulled out a hard case, opening it to reveal surveillance equipment. Cameras, audio recorders. Equipment that shouldn't have been in civilian hands, but had found its way into his possession through channels he didn't discuss. We turn this cabin into a trap. They attack, we document everything. We defend ourselves, and we hand the FBI evidence of attempted murder. That's your plan? Sarah's voice rose. Wait for armed men to attack and hope you survive long enough to record it? The alternative is running, and running means Maggie loses everything. Harlow wins. And the next person who stands up gets crushed. Sometimes the only way forward is through. He met her eyes. You don't have to stay. This gets dangerous, and you're a journalist, not a combatant. Sarah's jaw set. I've been chasing this story for 8 months. I'm not leading now. The rest of Sunday was preparation. Ethan positioned cameras covering all approaches, concealed but with clear fields of view. He walked Sarah and Maggie through basic emergency procedures. Where to shelter, how to move if the cabin was breached. Maverick patrolled constantly, nose working, every sense tuned to detect approaching threats. At 1500 hours, Sarah's phone buzzed. She checked it, face going white. It's my source at the county assessor's office. Harlow just filed an emergency demolition order on Maggie's building. Claims it's structurally unsafe after the break-in. He's got authorization to bring it down tomorrow morning. That's not legal. Maggie protested. I own the property. He can't just destroy it. ... He can if the county engineer signs off on immediate danger to public safety. And the county engineer is Bill Morrison, whose brother Frank lost his cannery to fire 6 months ago. Sarah's voice was bitter. Frank sold cheap and left town. Bill probably doesn't want his family targeted next. Ethan pulled up satellite imagery of the town on his laptop, studying approach routes and defensive positions. If they demolish the building, they destroy evidence. David's documents reference specific parts of the structure, hiding places, things that would prove tampering. We can't let that happen. What are you suggesting? Maggie asked. I'm suggesting we go back to town, tonight, secure the building and dare them to come through us to demolish it. That's insane, Sarah said. You'd be completely exposed, no cover, surrounded with Harlow's entire operation and corrupt police against you. Which is why they won't expect it. They think we're hiding up here. Defensive posture. Instead, we take the fight to them, fortify the bookshop, and make them assault a position we control. He turned to Maggie. It's your choice, your property, your risk. She stood, moving to the window, looking down at the town shrouded in afternoon mist. Rusty joined her, the little dog somehow sensing the importance of the moment. When she turned back, her face held the same determination Ethan had seen in soldiers preparing for patrol into hostile territory. That building is all I have left of David. It's where we built our dreams, where he died surrounded by books he loved. If I let them destroy it without fighting, I dishonor everything he was. She straightened her spine. We go back. They loaded into Ethan's truck as evening fell, carrying everything they'd need for a siege. Weapons, ammunition, surveillance equipment, supplies. Maverick rode in back, alert and ready. The descent into town felt like dropping into enemy territory, which in every meaningful sense, it was. Harbor pages sat dark and violated, police tape across the shattered window, but no actual police presence. Ethan had expected that. Real protection would interfere with Harlow's plans. They entered through the back, moving quickly, Maverick clearing rooms with the efficiency of countless combat operations. Once inside, Ethan transformed the bookshop into a defensive position. He repositioned shelving to create barriers and cover, established clear firing lanes, placed cameras monitoring all approaches. The building was old but solid, brick construction with good sightlines. The shattered front window was a vulnerability, but he covered it with furniture that would stop anything short of rifle rounds. Sarah set up her recording equipment, ensuring multiple redundant systems. Everything that happened here would be documented, time-stamped, admissible in court. Maggie moved through the wreckage of her shop, collecting books, straightening what could be straightened, refusing to let destruction be the final word. Rusty stayed close, offering comfort through presence. At 2100 hours, Maverick's ears swiveled toward the street. Company. Ethan checked the camera feeds. 3 vehicles, this time. The Escalade, the pickup, and a white panel van. 8 men total, including Brennan. They weren't trying to hide. This was a show of force. "Remember the plan," Ethan said quietly. "Sarah, you're recording. Maggie, you stay in the back room with Rusty. Door closed, behind cover. If this goes bad, there's a route through the basement to the neighboring building. You run and don't stop. What about you? I'm going to give them a chance to leave. After that, it's their choice." He stepped to the broken window, visible and unarmed in the streetlight, projecting calm authority. Brennan and his men spread out in a semicircle, backlit by headlights, trying to use light to blind and intimidate. "Mr. Cole," Brennan called, "you're trespassing on property marked for demolition. Leave now or be removed. This property belongs to Margaret Chen. The demolition order is fraudulent. Leave now and no one gets hurt." Brennan laughed, but it sounded forced. "You're outnumbered 8-1. You really think you can stop us?" "No," Ethan said calmly. "I think you're going to stop yourselves, because everything happening right now is being recorded on multiple systems with live upload to off-site servers. Every threat, every illegal action, everything that proves conspiracy and attempted murder. You attack this building, you're not just fighting me. You're creating evidence that will put you in federal prison for 20 years. Uncertainty rippled through the men. This wasn't what they'd expected. They were used to victims who had no recourse, no protection, no witnesses that mattered. Brennan's face hardened. "You're bluffing." "Am I? Check your phone." Sarah Winters has been live streaming this entire conversation to her journalism network. Thousands of people are watching right now. "You want to commit felony assault on camera?" Several men did pull out phones, checking, faces going pale as they found the stream. Sarah had indeed gone live. Her commentary providing context, identifying Brennan by name, linking him to Harlow. "Kill the stream," Brennan ordered. But the damage was done. They'd been identified, witnessed. The shield of anonymity and plausible deniability was gone. "Last chance," Ethan said. "Walk away. Tell Harlow his intimidation tactics are over. Or commit crimes on camera and spend the rest of your lives in prison." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Brennan made his choice. He drew a pistol from his waistband, aiming at Ethan. "Guess we'll have to destroy the evidence along with the witnesses." Ethan smiled, cold and predatory. Wrong choice. He dropped below the windowsill as Brennan fired, the shot going high, and Maverick erupted from the darkened doorway like a missile of fur and teeth. The night exploded into chaos. Maverick hit Brennan at full speed, 95 pounds of military-trained aggression targeting the gun hand with precision that came from hundreds of training exercises. Teeth closed on Brennan's wrist, bone crunching audibly, the pistol spinning away across wet pavement. Brennan's scream cut through the night as he went down hard. Ethan moved through the doorway in a combat crouch, his own Sig Sauer tracking targets with cold efficiency. "Drop your weapons, now!" 2 of Brennan's men froze, hands moving toward the skull in automatic surrender. But the other 5 were committed, pulling guns, spreading out, trying to establish crossfire. These were the true believers, the ones who'd crossed too many lines to turn back now. Ethan fired twice, controlled pairs, aiming low. A man screamed as his kneecap exploded. Another went down, clutching his thigh. Not kill shots, incapacitation. Every round was being recorded. Every action would be scrutinized. This had to be clean. Maverick, guard! The German Shepherd released Brennan's mangled wrist, pivoting to face two men flanking from the left. His snarl was pure menace, body coiled to strike, and both men stumbled backward. One raised his weapon toward the dog. Ethan's shot took him in the shoulder, spinning him around. The gun clattered away. Next person who aims at my partner gets center mass. Test me. The remaining standing men were breaking, combat discipline crumbling under the reality that their target was shooting back with professional accuracy. The live stream was still running, Sarah's voice providing real-time narration. Thousands of viewers watching violence unfold in real time. Then, the white panel van's rear doors burst open, and 3 more men emerged, but these were different. Body armor, rifles, military-grade equipment that turned this from intimidation into warfare. Contact rear, Ethan shouted, diving behind a concrete planter as automatic fire stitched across the bookshop's brick facade. This wasn't harassment anymore. This was a kill team. He keyed his phone, speed dial connecting to Sarah inside. Get Maggie out. Basement route now. We're moving. The tactical team advanced with professional precision, leapfrogging cover, suppressing fire, forcing Ethan to stay down. These weren't street thugs. These were contractors, probably former special operations. And they were here to eliminate witnesses and evidence. Maverick was pinned by the truck, unable to advance without exposure. The tactical team was 20 yards out and closing. In 30 seconds, they'd have angle on Ethan's position. He pulled a flashbang from his vest, old habits dying hard, equipment acquired through channels that didn't ask questions. Cooked it for 2 seconds, then threw it high, arcing over the tactical team's position. The explosion was light and sound and disorientation. Ethan moved immediately, combat roll to new cover, firing as he moved. 1 tactical operator went down. The other 2 stumbled, training keeping them functional but temporarily disrupted. Maverick, forward, strike! The dog launched from concealment, hitting the nearest operator at knee level, the impact slamming the man into the pavement. Ethan followed, closing distance, taking the fight to them because staying defensive meant death. He engaged the second operator hand-to-hand, deflecting the rifle barrel, delivering a palm strike to the throat that crushed the windpipe. The man went down choking. The third spun toward Ethan, weapon coming up, finger on trigger. Sarah's car roared out of the alley beside the bookshop, high beams catching the operator full in the face. He fired blind, rounds sparking off pavement. And then the car hit him at 30 miles per hour. He flew backward, body crumpling. The car screeched to a stop. Sarah leaned out, face white but determined. Get in! Maverick, with me! Ethan dove through the rear door, the dog following in one fluid motion. Sarah accelerated before the door closed, tires smoking, heading away from town on the coast road. Behind them, the scene was chaos. Injured men scattered across the street. The live stream had captured everything. Police sirens wailed in the distance, too late and too compromised to matter. Where's Maggie? Ethan demanded. Safe. E-house, old fishing cabin owned by my uncle, 5 miles north, not connected to any of us. Sarah's hands were white-knuckled on the wheel. That was insane. They had automatic weapons, body armor. Who brings that kind of firepower to intimidate an old woman? Someone protecting something bigger than we understood. Ethan checked his weapon, reloading, running tactical assessment. Those weren't local muscle. Those were professional contractors, military trained. Carlo brought in a kill team. The live stream got everything. 20,000 people watched. It's all over social media. You can't cover this up. Which means Harlow's going to panic. Trapped animals are most dangerous. He pulled out his phone, dialing the number Sarah had provided. Time to bring in the cavalry. The call connected. Special Agent Marcus Wedd, FBI Portland Field Office. Agent Wedd, my name is Ethan Cole. I'm a former Navy SEAL currently in Anchor Bay, Oregon. In the last 10 minutes, I've engaged a team of armed contractors attempting to murder a witness in a corruption investigation. Everything was captured on live stream with 20,000 viewers. I have multiple perpetrators injured and in custody, evidence of organized crime, and a federal case sitting in your lap. How fast can you get here?" There was a pause. "Say that again." Ethan repeated it, calm and precise, providing location, situation, and threat assessment. Years of giving after-action reports made his delivery credible, authoritative. This wasn't a panicked civilian. This was a military professional reporting contact. "Do not move from your current location," Webb said, his voice sharp with urgency. "I'm mobilizing a response team now. ETA, 90 minutes. Can you hold that long?" "Affirmative. But you need to understand something. Local law enforcement is compromised. Chief Dale Crenshaw is on the payroll of Vincent Harlow. The primary target of this investigation. Any local police response will be hostile." "Understood. Federal agents only. Sit tight, Mr. Cole. Help is coming." The call ended. Ethan looked at Sarah. "You did good back there. Probably saved my life." She laughed shakily. "I ran someone over with my car. That's not exactly journalistic objectivity. That was defense of another. Legally justified when someone's about to be shot." He paused. "But you're part of this now. All the way in. No walking away." "I was always all the way in." She gripped the wheel tighter. "My dad lost his hardware store to Harlow's pressure. Had a heart attack 3 months after he sold. Died in the hospital with nothing but debts and broken dreams. I've been waiting for a chance to take Harlow down. Tonight was that chance." They reached the safe house 20 minutes later, a weathered structure clinging to the cliff edge, isolated and defensible. Maggie waited inside with Rusty, her face flooding with relief when Ethan entered. "Thank God. I heard the shooting. I thought, we're fine, but this escalated beyond intimidation. Harlow sent professional contractors with orders to kill." He moved to the window, scanning the darkness. "FBI is inbound, 90 minutes. Until then, we hold here." "Will they really help, or are they compromised too?" "Agent Webb is financial crimes, federal level. It's outside Harlow's sphere of influence. And with the live stream evidence, this is too public to bury. Harlow's protection only works in shadows. We just dragged everything into the light." The next hour crawled past with agonizing slowness. Ethan maintained perimeter security, Maverick rotating patrol with him. Sarah monitored social media, watching the live stream footage spread virally, news outlets picking it up, public outrage building. "It's working," she said, showing her phone. "State officials are commenting." SDI Portland office just released a statement confirming an investigation. Harlow's lawyers are in damage control mode. "Harlow himself?" Ethan asked. Radio silence. "His phone is going to voicemail. His office says he's unavailable." She paused, scrolling through feeds. "But his helicopter left his estate 20 minutes ago. Flight path heading south toward California." Ethan's jaw tightened. "He's running. Can they stop him?" "Not without federal warrant. And that takes time." He checked his watch. 40 minutes until FBI arrival. 40 minutes for Harlow to cross state lines, disappear into legal complexity, use wealth and connections to avoid consequences. Meanwhile, across town in a situation room hastily assembled, Vincent Harlow's voice crackled over speakerphone to his remaining operatives. 52 years old, facing complete destruction of everything he'd built. And the iron control he'd maintained for years was fracturing. "I don't care about the publicity. I don't care about the FBI. That woman and everyone helping her need to be eliminated before they can testify. Burn everything. The bookshop, the safe house, anyone who stands in the way. Make it look like they started the fire trying to fake evidence. No witnesses, no evidence, just ashes." Dale Crenshaw, Anchor Bay's compromised. Missed police chief, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Vincent, this is too hot now. The whole country is watching. We can't just—" "You'll do what you're paid to do, Dale. Or I'll make sure everyone knows about your offshore accounts and the evidence tampering. You go down with me, or you help finish this. Choose." The line went dead. Crenshaw looked at the 3 remaining enforcers, men who'd already crossed too many lines to turn back. "Gear up, we end this tonight." Back at the safe house, Maverick's head snapped up, a low growl building. Ethan moved to the window, scanning darkness with night vision monocular pulled from his gear. Headlights, multiple vehicles, approaching fast on the coast road. Too soon for FBI and moving with aggressive purpose. "They're coming," he said quietly. "Everyone to defensive positions. This is the final push." Sarah moved Maggie to the most protected interior room, then returned with her camera. "Still recording. Whatever happens, the world will see." Ethan checked his weapons, spare magazines, prepared for what he'd hoped to avoid but knew was coming. Maverick pressed against his leg, ready for commands, ready for battle. Outside, engines growled closer through the darkness. Headlights illuminated the cabin's weathered walls. Vehicle doors opened, voices carrying on the wind. Then a voice amplified by megaphone. Dale Crenshaw's authority, now wielded as weapon. "This is Anchor Bay Police. You're harboring a fugitive. Come out with hands up, or we're coming in." Ethan smiled grimly. They'd just made their final mistake. Threatening law enforcement action while wearing police uniforms on camera while conducting an illegal assault. He raised his voice to Carrie. "This location is under federal protection. FBI is inbound. Any assault will be met with lethal force and prosecuted as attempted murder of a federal witness." The response was a Molotov cocktail arcing through darkness, shattering against the cabin's wall, flames spreading hungry and bright. They'd chosen fire. Just like before, the signature Harlow tactic. But this time, someone was ready to fight back. The flames climbed the cabin's exterior wall with hungry efficiency. Orange light turning night into flickering daylight. Smoke began filtering through gaps in the weathered wood, acrid and choking. Ethan's tactical mind ran calculations with cold precision. The structure would be fully involved in 15 minutes. They had to move. "Sarah, get Maggie and Rusty to the north window. There's a ravine 20 yards out. Provides cover and concealment down to the beach." He pulled chemical fire extinguishers from under the sink, the cabin's minimal safety equipment. "I'll suppress the fire long enough to create an exit window. What about you?" Maggie's voice shook but held steady. "Maverick and I are buying you time. Go, now." Sarah didn't argue, recognizing command authority when she heard it. She guided Maggie through the smoke-filled interior. Rusty clutched against the older woman's chest, toward the window Ethan indicated. Outside, voices shouted coordination, men positioning to cut off escape routes. Ethan deployed the extinguishers against the flames, creating a temporary gap in the fire's advance. Not enough to stop it, but enough to prevent immediate collapse. Then he moved to a position with clear sight lines to the attackers' vehicles, Maverick at his side. "This is your last warning," he shouted over the fire's roar. "Federal agents are 3 minutes out. Disperse now or face federal charges." The response was another Molotov cocktail, this one shattering through what remained of the front window. The interior erupted in flame, cutting off the main exit. They'd committed fully now, past any point of plausible deniability. This was attempted murder, captured on camera, witnessed by thousands. Crenshaw's voice carried through the smoke. "Burn them out. No survivors." That was it. The final line crossed. Ethan shifted from defensive to offensive posture. He couldn't let them contain the escape route. Time to turn hunted into hunter. "Maverick, hunt." The German shepherd disappeared into darkness beyond the firelight. A shadow with teeth, circling wide to flank. Ethan moved to the window Sarah had used, rolling through into night, weapon up, scanning sectors with combat efficiency. 2 men were positioned to intercept fleeing occupants, exactly where he'd expected. He engaged the first with a suppressed double tap, center mass, the man dropping without sound. The second spun toward the noise, weapon rising, and Maverick hit him from behind. The man's scream cut off as 95 pounds of trained aggression drove him face first into rocky ground. Ethan was on him in seconds, zip-tying hands behind back, securing the threat. "Stay down, move, and you die." He continued forward, using terrain and darkness, years of special operations training reducing him to a ghost. 3 more men remained between the burning cabin and safety. He could hear them coordinating, trying to establish perimeter. But they were contractors and corrupt cops, not seasoned operators. They bunched up silhouetted against their own vehicle headlights, basic mistakes that would get you killed in actual combat. From the ravine, Sarah's voice carried faintly. "We're clear, moving to beach." Crenshaw heard it too, redirecting his men. "They're running north, cut them off." That put their backs to Ethan. Fatal positioning. He engaged with cold precision, targeting legs and arms, incapacitating without killing. 3 shots, 3 men down. Screaming in pain, but alive. Maverick secured each one, standing guard, teeth bared in clear promise. That left Crenshaw himself, The corrupt police chief, now isolated and exposed. He spun wildly, trying to locate threats in the darkness, pistol shaking in his hands. Cole, you can't win this. Harlow owns this whole state. Judges, senators, people you can't touch. Ethan stepped into the firelight, weapon leveled, voice carrying absolute authority. Drop it, Chief. It's over. You don't understand what you're up against. Desperation made Crenshaw's voice crack. I was just trying to survive. Harlow threatened my family. I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. You chose money over duty, power over honor. Now you get to live with that in federal prison. Ethan advanced slowly, Maverick flanking. Gun down, hands up, last chance. For a moment, Crenshaw seemed to consider fighting, going out in flames rather than facing consequences. Then the night erupted with new sound. Helicopters, multiple birds inbound, searchlights cutting through darkness. Vehicle engines on the coast road, heavy trucks moving fast. FBI, drop your weapons, hands where we can see them. The federal response team arrived like cavalry from old westerns, tactical vehicles surrounding the scene, agents in full gear establishing perimeter with professional efficiency. A helicopter spotlight pinned Crenshaw in brilliant white light. Nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. He dropped his pistol, hands rising slowly. I want a lawyer. I'm not saying anything without a lawyer. Smart choice, Ethan said quietly, securing him with zip ties. Special Agent Marcus Webb emerged from a black SUV, mid-40s, compact build, eyes that missed nothing. He took in the scene with swift assessment. Burning cabin, 5 injured suspects, 1 secured police chief. And Ethan Cole standing calm in the center of it all, weapon holstered. German Shepherd at perfect heel. Mr. Cole, I presume? Agent Webb. Ethan gestured toward the ravine. 3 civilians sheltering north position. 1 elderly female witness, 1 journalist, 1 dog, all unharmed. Medical team, retrieve the civilians. Tactical, secure all suspects. Evidence team, document everything before the fire destroys it. Webb's orders were crisp, immediate. Then his attention returned to Ethan. You've had an interesting evening. Self-defense, all of it. Multiple witnesses and video documentation. I've seen the live stream. 20 million views and climbing. You've created quite the political firestorm. Webb almost smiled. My director got calls from 3 senators and the governor in the last hour. Everyone's suddenly very concerned about corruption in coastal Oregon. Funny how public attention motivates action. Isn't it, though? Webb pulled out a tablet showing satellite imagery and tracking data. Vincent Harlow's helicopter crossed into California 40 minutes ago, landed at a private airstrip near Redding. We have agents moving to intercept, but his lawyers are already filing motions, claiming persecution. He'll run. Money and connections can disappear a man. Normally, yes, but you've given us something rare. Unimpeachable evidence. Video of his contractors attempting murder. Financial records linking him to organized crime, and witnesses willing to testify now that they know they'll have protection. Webb looked up from the tablet. Margaret Chen's late husband was building a RICO case before he died. You know that? I'd heard. Convenient timing on that stroke. We're exhuming the body tomorrow, checking for toxins. If Harlow murdered him to stop the investigation, that's capital murder. No bail, no plea deals. He dies in prison. Ethan felt something release in his chest. Tension he'd carried since finding Maggie injured and alone. Justice. Real justice, not just survival. What do you need from us? Statements, testimony, your cooperation with prosecution. In exchange, full federal protection for Mrs. Chen, and immunity for any gray area actions you took tonight. Webb's eyes were knowing. That flashbang you deployed wasn't legal civilian equipment. The surveillance gear at the bookshop required licenses you don't have. I'm willing to overlook procedural issues given the circumstances. Appreciate it. Medical teams brought Maggie, Sarah, and Rusty up from the beach. The older woman looked exhausted, traumatized, but alive. When she saw Ethan, tears tracked down her soot-stained face. You did it. You actually did it. We did it, he corrected gently. You refused to break. Sarah documented everything. I just provided security. You provided hope. Hope, she embraced him, small and fierce. This woman who'd lost everything, but wouldn't surrender her dignity. David would have liked you. He always said the world needed more people willing to stand up. Over the next hours, the scene transformed into organized chaos. Evidence teams photographed everything. Medics treated injured suspects who would face federal charges. Crenshaw and his men were transported to Portland in armored vehicles. Their corruption now public record. The cabin burned to ash, but its sacrifice had bought the evidence needed. Sarah interviewed everyone, her journalism instincts overriding exhaustion. The story that would emerge from tonight would win awards, expose corruption across 3 states, and force systemic change. She'd spent 8 months chasing shadows. Now she had everything documented, verified, undeniable. As dawn broke gray and cold over Anchor Bay, the town woke to federal agents on every corner, news helicopters circling, and the realization that Vincent Harlow's empire had crumbled overnight. Other victims emerged, emboldened by public attention. Stories of intimidation, violence, corruption. A decade of crimes exposed in single morning. Webb pulled Ethan aside as the sun rose. "We got him." Harlow was apprehended attempting to board a private jet in Sacramento. He's in federal custody, charged with racketeering, conspiracy to commit murder, witness tampering, and about 40 other counts. His lawyers are already trying to deal, but with this much evidence, we don't need to negotiate. What about his political protection? Vanished the moment this went public. Senators who took his money are scrambling to distance themselves. Everyone wants to be on the right side of this now. Webb smiled coldly. Funny how courage appears when cameras are watching. And Mrs. Chen? Full protection. New identity if she wants it, though I suspect she'll stay. This is her home, and now it's safe. He extended his hand. Thankful, Mr. Cole, you did something rare. You stood up when everyone else looked away. The system failed, and you forced it to work. Ethan shook his hand, feeling the weight of the last 3 days finally lifting. Just did what needed doing. Maybe, but most people don't. Most people stay quiet, stay safe, let evil win because fighting is hard. Webb's voice softened. Your country could use more people like you. If you ever consider coming back to service, even civilian contract work, call me. He handed Ethan a card, then moved to coordinate the continuing operation. Around them, Anchor Bay was waking to a new reality. Freedom from fear. Justice after years of corruption. The beginning of healing. Maggie found Ethan watching the sunrise. Maverick at his side, both of them exhausted but satisfied. What happens now? She asked. Now you rebuild. Take back your shop, your life, everything they tried to steal. Will you stay? Help with that? He was quiet for a long moment, watching light spread across the ocean. I came here to hide, to forget, to pretend I could stop being what I am. He looked down at Maverick, the dog who'd never let him quit. But some things you can't run from. Some things are part of you. That's not an answer. He smiled, tired but genuine. I'll stay until you're settled. Until I'm sure you're safe. After that, we'll see. She nodded, understanding. Some warriors couldn't ever fully rest. Some people were meant to stand between evil and innocent. It wasn't curse or blessing. It just was. 3 months later, late January brought storms that hammered the Oregon coast with winds that bent trees horizontal and waves that climbed cliff faces like living mountains. But inside Harbor Page's bookshop and cafe, warmth and light pushed back against winter's fury. Ethan Cole stood by the newly installed front window, watching rain sheet across glass that had been shattered by violence and replaced with something stronger. The bookshop had been restored, better than before. New shelving built by local craftsmen who donated labor. Fresh paint covering walls scarred by smoke. Books filling spaces that had been empty, donated from across the country when the story went national. Maggie moved through the space with energy he hadn't seen in their first meeting. 70-something, but alive in ways that transcended mere survival. She poured coffee for the morning regulars, residents of Anchor Bay who'd found their voice again now that fear's shadow had lifted. Rusty slept in a patch of sunlight near the register, the old corgi content in ways dogs understood better than humans. You're staring at the rain again, Sarah said, peering beside him with 2 steaming mugs. She'd stayed in Anchor Bay, turning the Harlow investigation into a book that was climbing bestseller lists and forcing conversations about corruption in small-town America. Thinking about leaving? Ethan accepted the coffee, non-committal. Thinking about what comes next. You've been saying that for 3 months. Takes time to ensure things are stable. Things are stable. Harlow's awaiting trial in Supermax, Crenshaw. Nishaw flipped on everyone, 15 other officials indicted. The FBI stationed a permanent field agent in town. Mrs. Chen is safer now than anywhere else in the country. Sarah studied his face. So what's really keeping you? Before he could answer, Maverick's head lifted from where he'd been dozing near the fireplace. The German shepherd's ears swiveled toward the door, but not with alarm. Recognition. A moment later, the door opened, and Special Agent Marcus Webb entered, shaking rain from his jacket. Terrible weather to drive 3 hours, Ethan observed. Wood is called, but some conversations need to happen face-to-face. Webb accepted coffee from Maggie with thanks, then gestured to a corner table. Got a minute? They sat, Maverick positioning himself where he could monitor both the door and Webb simultaneously. Old habits for both man and dog. Webb pulled out a tablet, pulling up classified files that made Ethan's eyebrows rise. I'm not supposed to show you this, but given your background and what you accomplished here, I'm taking liberties. He turned to the screen. Recognize this pattern? The files showed property acquisitions across 6 western states, shell companies, intimidation tactics, suspicious deaths, different names, different corporations, but methodology identical to Harlow's operation. Harlow wasn't independent, Ethan said quietly. He was part of something larger. Chinese national security front companies using American real estate for money laundering and strategic asset acquisition. Harlow was one of 30 operatives we've identified so far. Most are still active, still destroying communities, still operating with political protection. Webb's voice hardened. We're building cases, but it takes time. Years. Meanwhile, people suffer. And you're telling me this why? Because the FBI has authorizations to embed civilian contractors with specialized skill sets into investigative operations. Former military, intelligence backgrounds. People who can operate in gray areas where traditional agents can't. He met Ethan's eyes directly. You demonstrated abilities and judgment that make you uniquely qualified, and you've already proven you can't walk away when innocent people need protecting. Ethan was quiet, processing implications. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you a purpose. Steady pay, federal authority when needed, support infrastructure. In exchange, you do what you did here. Identify threats, protect witnesses, gather evidence that breaks these operations. Webb glanced at Maverick. Your partner would be included. Full authorization for K-9 operations. Sounds like you're asking me to be a weapon you can aim at problems. I'm asking you to be what you've always been, a protector. A warrior for people who can't fight back. The difference is, you'd have legal backing and resources instead of operating alone. Webb leaned forward. These people, these criminals hiding behind shell companies and corrupt officials, they're destroying American communities. Anchor Bay isn't unique. There are dozens of towns facing the same threats. You could make a difference. Sarah, who'd been listening from the counter, approached. He's right, you know. There are more Maggies out there. More small towns being crushed by people who think money makes them untouchable. Maggie joined them, setting down her own coffee. I'm not going to tell you what to do, Ethan. You've earned the right to whatever life you choose. But I'll say this. David used to quote Edmund Burke. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. You're not a man who can do nothing. It's not in your nature. Ethan looked at each of them, then down at Maverick. The dog met his eyes with that uncanny intelligence, that bond forged in fire and blood, and in that moment, understanding passed between them that required no words. He'd come to Anchor Bay broken, haunted by failures in Syria, trying to escape responsibility for lives other than his own. But 3 days of standing between evil and innocent had reminded him of something fundamental. Peace wasn't the absence of conflict. Peace was knowing you'd stood up when it mattered. I'll need autonomy, he said finally. If I'm going into situations, I make tactical decisions. No micromanagement from administrators who've never been in the field. Webb smiled. Agreed. And I'm not doing this to be a hero. I'm doing it because someone has to. Best motivation there is. Ethan extended his hand. Then I'm in. They shook, sealing the commitment. Sarah raised her coffee mug in toast. To the most overqualified private contractor the FBI never officially employed. Over the following weeks, Ethan prepared for his new role. Training at federal facilities, clearances processed, equipment issued through channels that officially didn't exist. Maverick underwent recertification that he passed with effortless superiority, proving combat skills didn't fade just because the uniform did. But he returned to Anchor Bay regularly, checking on Maggie, ensuring the community remained secure. The town had transformed in 3 months, new businesses opening, young people returning. The fear that had hung over everything lifted like morning fog, burned away by sunlight. On his final visit before his first official assignment, Ethan found the bookshop hosting a community meeting. 20 people gathered to discuss town revival, organizing committees, planning futures that had seemed impossible 4 months ago. Maggie led discussions with confidence. No longer the frightened widow facing destruction alone, but a pillar around which community rebuilt. She saw him by the door and excused herself, approaching with Rusty waddling behind. "You're leaving." New assignment, small town in Idaho facing similar pressure. Ranchers being forced off generational land by corporate acquisition. More people who need a guardian. She reached up, straightening his collar in a gesture that was pure motherly affection. "You'll be careful?" "Always am." That's not an answer, but she smiled, accepting what he couldn't promise. "Will you come back?" "When I can. This feels like home in ways I didn't expect." "Because you made it safe. Homes are built by the people who protect them, not just the people who live in them." She hugged him, fierce, despite her small stature. "Thank you, Ethan, for everything, for standing up, for reminding us that good people still exist." He returned the embrace, uncomfortable with gratitude, but understanding its necessity. "You did the hard part. You refused to break. I just provided backup. We make a good team then, the stubborn old woman and the warrior who can't walk away from a fight." Sarah appeared with a package wrapped in brown paper. "Something for the road. Don't open it until you're somewhere that matters." He accepted it, surprised. "What is it?" "You'll see. Call it a reminder of why you're doing this." Outside, his truck waited, loaded with gear for the next mission. Maverick was already in the passenger seat, alert and ready. The dog had never questioned their purpose, never doubted their path. Perhaps that was the lesson. Stop overthinking and simply do what needed doing. Ethan climbed behind the wheel, started the engine, but paused before leaving. Through the bookshop window, he could see Maggie returning to her community meeting, Rusty at her feet. Sarah documenting everything for the historical record she was building. Normal life made possible by standing against abnormality. He pulled onto the coast road heading south, rain beginning to clear as he drove. Somewhere in Idaho, people faced threats they couldn't overcome alone. Soon, they wouldn't be alone. Soon, a quiet man and his German shepherd would arrive, assess the situation, and do what neither could do in uniform anymore, but both were hardwired to accomplish. Protect, serve, stand between evil and innocent. Not for glory or recognition, but because someone had to. Miles down the road, with coastline fading in the rearview mirror, Ethan opened Sarah's package. Inside was a framed photograph, the bookshop's grand reopening, 3 weeks after the arrests. Maggie cutting a ribbon, surrounded by community, smiling genuinely for the first time since her husband's death. And in the background, barely visible, Ethan and Maverick watching from the periphery, guardians who preferred shadows to spotlight. Beneath the photo, Sarah had written a single line in her journalist's precise handwriting. "Sometimes all it takes is one person willing to stand." Ethan set the frame on his dashboard where he could see it during the drive. Reminder and motivation. Promise and purpose. His phone buzzed with message from Webb. New intelligence on the Idaho situation. Corporate enforcers with history of violence. Local sheriff potentially compromised. Civilian casualties likely if intervention didn't occur. He accelerated, highway unwinding before him, Maverick alert beside him, both of them heading toward danger because that was their nature. Not seeking conflict, but not avoiding it when innocent people needed protection. Behind them, Anchor Bay receded into distance, but not memory. The town would continue healing, growing, living free because someone had stood up, and ahead, somewhere in Idaho, another town waited for the same gift. The warrior and his dog drove on through clearing skies, ready for whatever came next. Because somewhere out there, someone was waiting for a hero. And when duty called, they would answer. Always. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and hit the like button. Tell us in the comments, what would you have done in Ethan's place? Would you have stood up or walked away? And remember, in a world that often feels dark, Sometimes the light comes from ordinary people making extraordinary choices. May you find the courage to stand when it matters. May you protect those who cannot protect themselves. And may you never forget that one person willing to act can change everything. God bless you all, and thank you for being part of this community. Until next time, stay strong, stay brave, and never stop fighting for what's right.